Hi, folks. Welcome to Ditto Insurance. I'm Shashank, your host, and today I have with me our Senior Partnership Manager, Rishabh Kashyap, in the house. Welcome, Rishabh.
Thanks for having me, Shashank. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Rishabh, the reason why we're doing this special episode is uh, last week we had a video that went out. We spoke about the different exclusions in health insurance. Well, while I prepared that list, I saw that specific chronic illnesses weren't a part of exclusion. So that got me thinking chronic illnesses are really, really tough, first of all, to manage. But securing a health insurance for it could be even tougher, but not impossible. So that's why I want to break down, what is considered as chronic illness and how is the health insurance scenario for chronic illness patients. And so that's why, let's start right away. Why don't we start with what chronic illnesses are?
Absolutely. So you can basically define chronic illnesses as something that is, a long-term issue which, requires constant focus. Think of something like, thyroid diseases or cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, hypertension. So all these kind of issues, right? So they need constant focus to, ensure that it's either reversed or taken care of or, kept under control so it doesn't exacerbate.
Okay. Uh, Now, there should be different ranges of different chronic illnesses, right? Because there are definitely plans out there. We made a video for health insurance for diabetics. We made health insurance for cancer patients. So I'm sure there is a gradation for these chronic illnesses. Is that understanding right?
That's true. So you have different levels of chronic illnesses as well, right? So some of them, which I defined, where they are lifestyle issues like thyroid, diabetes, etc., and ones you have which are higher on the severity scale, like cardiovascular diseases, and for example, even kidney diseases as well, which do require more attention, and especially when it comes to healthcare related costs, right? So that keeps on going up, when it comes to treating these diseases. So depends on the severity scale.
All right. Now let's look at two scenarios. If I were to purchase a health insurance and then if I were to encounter some serious chronic illness, this is scenario one. Scenario two is I already have a serious chronic illness and then I want to head out to get an insurance to cover my costs. So can you give me the bird's eye view on both these scenarios, how they're going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so insurers are willing to cover, chronic conditions, but one thing that people have to be aware of that, see, they look at it from a risk perspective, right? So anyone with a chronic illness, they consider it as a high risk case. So they would be willing to cover it, but with certain terms and conditions. So firstly, there is something called as a loading charge, where they have to pay, higher premium, right? So certain insurers take a lesser amount, and there are certain insurers, who have a certain range towards, what those loading charges can be, and that also depends on the severity of the chronic illness. That's probably the first condition to look out for. And second, of course, most important, which is like across the board with all the insurers, is the waiting periods. So every insurance, or if not, 95% of the health insurances out there do have a maximum waiting period of 3 years for covering chronic illnesses as a pre-existing disease.
Okay. So, what you say is if I were to even have a chronic illness, there is no way that I can get an insurance. I mean, I have to wait for 3 years. Is that understanding right?
To an extent, it is true, but fortunately, there are options out there where you can, customize certain pre-existing diseases-related waiting periods. So I wouldn't say it's not at all available, but it is available with certain terms and conditions.
Okay. So, if my understanding is right, maybe with a couple of add-ons, you can reduce the
Certainly,
waiting period. Yeah.
yes.
All right. Now let's get right into the plans that help cover patients with chronic illnesses. So if you have a list ready, let's hear that out. And for the sake of our viewers, let's even talk about the plans that help patients cover heart diseases as well.
Definitely.
So let's take that in the second bit of the discussion. So, but first, let's start with the wider range of chronic illnesses. So, what's on your list?
Well, I would say the most common ones, as I described, as lifestyle illnesses, right? So you have thyroid, you have hypertension, and diabetes, the obvious one. Unfortunately, people in their 20s these days are succumb to diabetes, and of course, most importantly, asthma. So you have diseases such as this, which fortunately do get covered at a earlier stage. Right. So when they buy health insurance plans, for example, companies like Care Health Insurance, which has a plan by the name of Care Supreme, and Aditya Birla, which has a policy by the name of Active One Max. Right. So it's a series, and even Niva Bupa Reassure 2.0, where all these options do provide the benefit of choosing an additional rider and having to reduce that waiting period, not instead of waiting for 3 years to cover those pre-existing diseases or chronic illnesses, but at a shorter period of time. So
Okay.
let's say maybe even after 30 days, and or even in some cases from day one.
I'm surprised that HDFC is not on the list. Is it because they don't have a rider to reduce the waiting period?
Well, HDFC unfortunately doesn't have any riders as such in their plans, which reduces the waiting periods. But they do have a specific policy by the name of HDFC Optima Energy, which does cover hypertension and diabetes from day one.
Okay.
But these two chronic illnesses in specific.
Okay. So, can you list out the common chronic illnesses? And if you could give me the plans that cover it, for the sake of our viewers, we'll even put out a table so that,
Certainly.
it's easier for them to refer as well. So, what's first on your list?
So I would say the most important one would be cardiovascular diseases, so cardiomyopathy or your cardiac arrests, where people have undergone angioplasty. So you have cardiovascular specific plans like Star Cardiac Care Platinum, Aditya Birla, Active One Max, and Manipal Cigna as well has a few policies such as the Secure Health, which do provide let's say, the option of serving a shorter amount of waiting periods for covering the cardiovascular diseases rather than other plans which have a longer waiting period. And even Care Health Insurance, fortunately, has a plan by the name of Care Heart. So that's one. And the other illness on top of my mind would be chronic kidney disease. Unfortunately, I would say Care Freedom from Care Health Insurance would be the only go to option and a primary recommendation in order to cover this as a pre existing condition.
A quick question because you brought up kidney. Is dialysis covered by insurance? That's one of the top questions that we get in the YouTube comments. So, is dialysis covered?
Dialysis indeed is covered as medical treatment, and it comes under something called as a daycare procedure. So, which does not require an overnight stay in the hospital, but just a couple of hours, and they'll be done with it. So, it falls under the daycare procedure, which is indeed covered by health insurance.
But dialysis needs recurring visits to the hospital. All the visits are covered?
Indeed, they are in fact covered. All the visits related to dialysis are actually covered.
Great. Okay. We can get back to your list.
Certainly. And speaking of other types of illnesses as well, you have something like COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, and asthma. Right. So policies such as Manipal Cigna Secure Health, and as I said, Aditya Birla Active One Max, they would be willing to take on the risk to cover these individuals with these diseases. Same goes with, I would say, Care Health Insurance with Care Supreme. And just to touch base on that, there are certain terms and conditions involved with that, especially from the waiting period standpoint, right? And you also have certain uncommon diseases such as sleep apnea. So here in this case, I would say care freedom would be one of the main options to consider for a pre-existing condition of sleep apnea.
Understood. All right. So, when we talk about medical costs being covered by your insurance, I'm sure there are different costs that come in for people with chronic illness. So, can you tell me how this works? You know, how the premiums are? Is it way expensive? You spoke about loading charge. So, if someone with chronic illness is now watching this video, how is the cost going to look for them?
Well, firstly, the premiums do depend on the age at which the person is taking the plan. So usually for people who are in the age brackets between 18 to 35, the younger group, right? So it tends to be at a range of anywhere between maybe like 12 to 16 to 20,000. And if you bring in the loading charges as well, which is under some companies, it can range from an additional 10% to additional 30% of the original cost of the policies. And then you have the next age bracket, right? So usually that is between 36 to 40 or 45, where the premiums do tend to range between about 30, 35, or even 40,000 in some cases, where you go up to the age of 50. And senior citizens, of course, the above the age of 60, right? It's indeed plan specific depending on the chronic illnesses that they might or might not have, but it can definitely cost a pretty penny.
Right, folks. So, as you heard, that there are tons of plans in the market, each curated for different chronic illnesses and for different people. Now, if you're in the market to find the plan which suits you and your family, then Ditto can be your perfect advisor. Our expert guidance is free and we help you in selecting health and term insurance plans. Head to the link in the description and book your free consultation with us. And in under 2 minutes, we'll assign an advisor to you. Now, that being said, Rishabh, let's take the discussion further into the chronic illnesses.
Just to highlight a few more diseases, especially something like pulmonary tuberculosis, where insurers are willing to cover this as a pre existing condition. Granted, if this issue happened more than 5 years ago, you have plans such as HDFC Ergo Optima Secure, Care Supreme, Aditya Birla, Active One Max, and Niva Bupa 2.0 as some of the best plans available out there. However, if pulmonary TB or other type of TBs are still being treated and it's an ongoing conditions, unfortunately, you have no plans that are available unless and until it's completely cured, and the mandatory waiting periods prior to buying the policy have been served. And just to add on to that, I would say issues such as HIV or AIDS and autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, lupus, for the moment, care freedom would be the primary option. But as a secondary and alternative, I would say HDFC Ergo's EquiCover, Manipal Cigna, Secure Health, as well as Star Special Care Gold can be some of the policies one can consider if they have these kind of illnesses. Another most important thing, unfortunately, a lot of people do suffer from certain disabilities, such as cerebral palsy, right? And if the disability percentage is less than 50%, fortunately, comprehensive plans are indeed available where you have plans such as HDFC Ergo, Optima Secure, Care Supreme, Aditya Birla, and Niva Bupa as well. However, if the disability percentage is more than 50%, people can consider plans such as Care Freedom, Star Special Care Gold, and Manipal Cigna Secure Health, as well as HDFC Ergo EquiCover as some alternatives.
All right, Rishabh, that was one comprehensive list. But one quick question. Waiting periods are usually 4 years, right? But you mentioned 3 years. Is that, did I hear that right?
You did. Fortunately, waiting periods right now are 3 years. They were at one point in time 4 years, but IRDAI fortunately stepped in and encouraged and informed all the insurers to actually reduce the maximum waiting period for these chronic illnesses as a pre existing disease from 4 years down to 3 years. In fact, IRDAI is also encouraging insurance companies to build specific policies for people with the chronic illnesses as a pre existing condition across age groups. So, certain changes that were brought in were not only the waiting period part, but also changing the age limits for which even senior citizens can be included into the plan who are above the age of 65.
And do you see that happening anytime soon?
In fact, it has already happened. So many insurers have, in fact, taken that rules and regulations as a change into consideration. And many insurers, especially the ones that we work with as well, have reduced the waiting periods as a maximum for pre existing conditions from 4 years down to 3 years.
Great. So, is there any takeaway that you'd like to give the audience that are watching the video today?
Well, do your own research as much as you can. Compare options and insurers across multiple platforms. But nevertheless, if you want to speak to someone who is a seasoned advisor, you always have Ditto Insurance. Our folks are well versed in all the terms and conditions and the nuances, and of course the jargons that are related to health insurance. You can book a call with any of our, insurance advisors at Ditto. The seasoned advisors will be able to help you out with specific jargons, the nuances of health insurance, and all the terms and conditions that go behind it.
Great, Rishabh. Thank you so much for that plug-in.
My pleasure.
And folks, that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you, Rishabh, so much for joining us and for doing tons of research on the different chronic illnesses. I'm sure that it was a mouthful and it was a full nights of work. But then, thank you so much for giving our audience the breakdown that they had asked for.
My pleasure.
So, folks, if you have any more doubts, you can ping us in the comments below. And I will see you in the next one. Happy insurance hunting.